Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mike's Plus One Plus One. Proudly sponsored by CoolStuffing.com, Alter Sleeves, as well as Twitch subscribers and Patreon supporters just like yourself. My name is Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Ruben Bressler down there.
Good evening. How's it going?
Yeah, and our very special guest for this episode, Brian Kibler. Come there.
Hello, I don't know where I am in relation to anyone else, but I'll just point in various directions.
Yes, you're in one of the corners, one assumes.
Definitely in a corner. There you go. But no one puts baby. Okay, whatever. Now, if you missed our pre-show / patron little bits, the patrons get access to that early. But with that, let's start the show. Up first is Outside Assistance. We've chosen a question from the comments of our last Plus One Plus One show. And that person's going to get $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com. So, Ruben, what is that question?
Well, I've decided to pick our very first back-to-back winner. And the reason why is there's a couple reasons why, but one of them is that this person didn't want a $50 gift certificate. They asked it to go to charity or to someone who would get their first commander deck or something like that. Yeah. And then they asked another very good question. So thank you to Isaac Ben Ruby, who wrote, I know I can't win 2 in a row, but I thought of another multi-part question. Consider this scenario. You're going about your day, then something happens and suddenly you're transported to another world. Your Planeswalker spark has ignited. What were you doing? What new powers have you awoken? And where are you after ignition?
Mr. Kibler?
That's a big question.
This was not what I was expecting when I sat down. Like,
right?
I don't know.
We're going
this
hard.
Exactly something that I've given much thought to.
You didn't think about what Planeswalker you would be
Come
and what
on.
mystical universe you would make up
Seriously,
Right.
what
at the drop of a
powers?
hat.
I mean,
What kind of nerd are you?
clearly, any ability that I have would be related to animals because well, here's my lap right now,
Hey.
and probably my spark would have ignited while I don't know, maybe like saving a dog from some sort of attack.
There you
And
go.
then it's like, okay, now I am a guardian to little pups everywhere.
Mm.
And then
Love
clearly
that.
that's appropriate in Ikoria. So
Mm,
Oh, okay.
there we
Perfect.
go.
I'm gonna go there and fix the companion mechanic.
Hey, I like that.
You're going
That's
to
my
do
goal.
the
That's
impossible.
what I exist for.
This man wants to do the impossible. Well, thank you, Isaac Ben Ruby, for being a part of the show. Get your prize by hitting us up on Twitter DMs at Magic Mike's Cast and get your questions in for next week's guest. And maybe you can win and be a part of Plus One Plus One. And now to introduce our guest, Ruben, take it away.
Hey, everybody. Brian Kibler needs no introduction, but I wrote one anyway. He is a game designer, broadcaster, and longtime CCG professional. He's a Magic the Gathering Hall of Famer and 2-time Pro Tour champion, and he was a part of teams that designed Ascension, the WoW TCG, and Soulforge, among many others. These days, he's a Twitch streamer and a video content creator, as well as, of course, as you saw already, a top-tier dog dad. Please welcome the Dragon Master himself, Brian Kibler.
Woo!
There you go.
Very, very exciting. Very exciting. So, so for those who may not be aware of yourself beyond obviously the intro, Mr. Kibler, and particularly in regards to Magic, sort of tell us your sort of origin story and how you got started in the game.
I started playing Magic, back at the dawn of time. I started playing in February of 1994. I actually got into it originally because I was at a gaming convention to play Dungeons and Dragons, which I had gotten into because I picked up some D&D books at a game store when I was there renting original Nintendo games. This is all really, really dating me. If the gray hair didn't. But yeah, and I like managed to pick up a couple of packs of Unlimited for the first packs that I ever got, and the first cards I opened in those packs were a Korma Spell, a Bayou, and a Mox Jet. So at the time, I was like, well, this Korma Spell's cool. It turns all your lands into your swamps into creatures. But I don't understand why this Bayou is worth $5 or this Mox Jet. These are just like lands. And yeah, well, I learned a little bit since then.
Sure.
And went from there, as it were. So as time kind of went on, you kind of, you increased your presence not only in Magic, but also sort of in gaming in general. And, at this point, you can look back on a fairly long career of not just playing, but also designing. And at this point, do you feel like you're happier as a player or you're happier as a designer?
I probably like what I'm doing now more than anything, which is kind of auxiliary content type stuff, streaming, doing, kind of like think pieces on design rather than necessarily working directly in game design. And that's because a lot of game design isn't actually games. A lot of game design is it's like spreadsheets and marketing and like, figuring out how you're going to pay for these cool ideas you have. And that's less exciting than, hey, I'm going to build a new deck, right? And I've, when I first actually went into game design, it was really because it didn't make any financial sense to be a pro gamer at that point. There wasn't anything like Twitch or YouTube. There, was basically just the strategy sites for Magic that you could like write for at the time, because there really wasn't video content back then even. And, that really wasn't enough, along with a few pro tours a year that you had to pay your travel to and hope to make enough money. And, even when I came back and was competing again, I was like, okay, well, there was a year that I qualified for the World Championship on points, mostly from Grand Prix, and lost money because of the cost to travel to all the events. Wow. So the whole, like, I just turn on my computer and people watch me play, that part's pretty fun. And it's a whole lot easier.
So I have a question about, you said that the type of content you're doing now is your favorite of, like, let's say the last 2 years or so. Do you have a thing that sticks out in your mind that you've done as far as content that has been your favorite thing that you've worked on or done?
Probably my favorite thing, I guess it's actually slightly over 2 years now. The whole COVID thing. Right. I mean, my favorite thing that I've done in the past few years was probably the commentary at the 2020 World Championship for Magic. I think that was probably the best broadcast that Magic had to that point. I think that like the combination of the the event itself, the players, the team that was behind it and everything, and just the overall quality being in Hawaii, all of that really added to, I think, just a really awesome event overall. And, it came a really long way from the previous sort of structure they had for a lot of the broadcasts for Pro Tours that I think had really, really improved, which is why I thought it was so unfortunate that we didn't have any live events for so long after that. And, I've only had a chance to do a couple of online things for other games since then, but I do really, really miss casting events, because I think that being able to tell the story of what's happening in a game in a way that both shines the light on what is impressive about what the players are doing, because that's really hard for a lot of people who aren't nearly as knowledgeable to understand in a TCG. It's not like basketball, right, where someone's playing basketball and you're like, holy cow, that was an incredible dunk or whatever. You can't tell why something is good or impressive unless someone can really explain it to you. And that makes, I think, strategy commentary like both really challenging but also really rewarding. And I miss doing it.
Yeah. So how did you handle the pandemic at this point? So now it's kind of in the rear view,
poorly,
sort of. How did that change things?
I spent a lot of time obviously at home, but I was actually incredibly fortunate in the timing of a few things with relation to the pandemic, because I had literally ordered like a home gym setup in January of 2020.
Oh wow!
And I got it set up in early March of 2020. So while a lot of people were like bemoaning the fact that gyms were closed and all this, I was just like, yeah, I can't leave my house to do anything else. So I'm just working out a lot, right?
And how is that? You do workout streams and stuff, right?
I do. Yeah. That was actually that I started doing that like basically at that same time. I'm like, well, I can't go anywhere. People are kind of stuck home watching stuff anyway. I should do gym streams, especially to, in a time like that in particular. I found it to be really important to try to help encourage people to take better care of themselves. Because in that kind of environment, it's very easy to be like, oh, I don't have to go to work. I can't go to work. I can't go out and do anything. I'm just going to, sit in my couch all day and be lazy, or I'm just going to drink too much or whatever, which I had my share of those things over the pandemic too, in both cases. But, trying to do what I could to both keep myself motivated, because that was part of the decision to do the streams too, was like, hey, if I'm turning on my camera and doing this, people are going to expect it. So I'm not going to just, slack off when I don't feel like it.
Now, we've had a couple of folks on the show at this point, Ollie in particular, who I think is coming out either just came out or is coming out soon, where working out, like physical health, is a major part of being a content creator. Now, I think that might be a little bit of a foreign concept because, while many of us were stuck inside during the pandemic and now we can go outside, as a streamer and a video content creator, a lot of your time is still spent inside. Mm-hmm. How important is it to maintain physical health for a job that's as sedentary as content creation?
I mean, I think it's really important. And, on top of doing direct like workout streams and, working out outside of those workout streams, I also have tried to do a number of things to improve the environment that I'm streaming in as far as my physical health goes. Like I have like an underdesk elliptical that I don't use nearly as much as I should, but I specifically got like a standing desk, a sit-stand desk, which I can, raise to a certain height so my knees don't hit the desk when I'm using the underdesk elliptical. I got like a pad that I can stand on, so I'm not just like standing on like the floor and my feet start to hurt or whatever. It's like a rubber padded sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And those sort of things, when for anyone, not just content creators, anyone who spends a lot of time at a desk, right? Spends a lot of time doing something that is fundamentally sedentary, can be really valuable, because you could only, especially for people who, aren't necessarily quite as cognizant of their nutrition as they ought to be, just adding bits and pieces of kind of mindless activity here and there is a really big deal. And I know that a lot of people, just get bored by like, running or like, any kind of exercise. And I mean, I have integrated playing games into my workouts. Like I play games on my iPad, when I've specifically got like a stand that I connect to my stationary bike for my iPad that I can just play games on it while I'm doing my like cardio. And it's very easy to just sit there for an hour and just be like, oh, the time is over, because I'm engrossed in something rather than just staring at the countdown for how much time's left in my workout.
Mm-hmm. Have you tried Ring Fit?
I have not, no.
That thing's it's really hard. I suck. I'm very out of shape, but it's actually very fun.
What is it?
Reminded me of what you said. So
well, when I was in college, I actually like got like a PlayStation and like pads to play DDR, because like it's like actually just like a good workout that I just would just throw on in like the main room of my fraternity house, and people would look at me funny like, what in the world are you doing? And I'm like, well, this is fun and it's a workout. So
very cool. So one of the things that we asked, we talked to Zebex last week, which was cool. And I'd asked her, if you could go back and right when you started to make content, and for yourself, honestly, sort of which point along the road of that content. But if you could go back and tell yourself and give yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself, all those years ago?
I don't know, because things have, there's, like you said, there's so many different points along the journey, basically. And like, I have a lot of people who ask me for advice about like content creation and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know that anything that I could tell you is necessarily applicable to your situation. Because I was in a really weird position when I started streaming, for instance. Like when I started streaming on Twitch, it was like, 2011? It was like late 2011 was my first Twitch stream.
Sounds right.
And like, the head tech of Twitch remoted into one of the head techs of Twitch remoted into my desktop to set it up for me, because I had no idea what I was doing. And they were Magic fans and wanted me to stream Magic on the platform. So it's like, maybe I tell myself to start streaming Hearthstone earlier. Because there was a significant period where I was playing Hearthstone, but didn't want to stream it because that was at the time that I was working on Soulforge. And I was like, well, I don't want to stream a competitive game to mine. And then it was like, at a certain point, I was just like, let's be honest. My game is not competitive with theirs, right? Like, it took a while to sort of like have that realization sink in, but not too long, because I remember when it was like PAX East in, God, when was it? 2012 or 13? When I guess it was 2013, I think, was when it was when Hearthstone was announced, and it was the same weekend that Soulforge like went into open beta. We had this big booth, huge presence, and no one cared because Blizzard was there with their digital game. So that was a bit of a dose of reality, because a big part of the reason that we made Soulforge was, hey, there just aren't really good digital card games out there, and there weren't like digital free to play card games that weren't at the time things that were like like Facebook games, basically. Those are the only things you can really find outside of like Magic Online, which, as we all know, not exactly the best in the business, but was the only game in town then. And we were like, hey, we're going to do all these things to make our game, you know, cheaper than Magic and you know, more accessible than Magic in all these various ways. And then Hearthstone, you know, is announced and is cheaper than us and obviously way better built than ours because we were a company of like a half dozen people and they're Blizzard. So
right now the SoulForge thing, I mean, now that that's kind of in the rear view and now it even kind of came back as like a Kickstarter card game thing and whatnot, sort of how do you view all that in the rear view these days?
So I mean, I'm glad we did it. I think it was a cool challenge. I do think that the biggest sort of takeaways in retrospect were, you know, that we tried to do too much. You know, we tried to, you know, especially through Kickstarter, because SoulForge was originally launched via Kickstarter, and I think that there was too much trust in the partners that we worked with in terms of the engineering side, that, you know, they'd be able to hit the timelines that they had, you know, suggested were reasonable, and actually, you know, execute and deliver like the features that we had talked about in you know, that time and at like a high enough quality, because, you know, we you know, as most things in software development tend to go, we're like, you know, way behind schedule and way over budget. And, you know, we were a very small company with not enough money to actually get it done in the way that we needed to. And, you know, the Kickstarter wasn't nearly enough to actually fund the whole thing. So it's like, okay, well, maybe we need to either be more realistic with the actual money we need on something like Kickstarter, rather than being like, hey, it's great to get a big, you know, big batch of money from this, and, you know, the eyeballs that you get, because a lot of Kickstarters are basically just about eyeballs these days, right? It's not even necessarily, you know, hey, we need your money to do this. It's, hey, we're doing this. In many cases, we already did it. This is just fancy pre-ordering. But no, we really needed the money, and it wasn't enough.
Now, there are some people in this world where, for the most part, how do I describe this? My mom is like this, where my mom, I look at everything she does, and everything she does, she's very good at. And it makes me kind of upset, because there are things I try and I'm not good at them. And it seems like everything you try, you're good at. So I'm going to ask you a difficult question. What are you bad at?
Pool.
Okay.
Drawing.
Okay.
It's funny because you know, we both play the same LARP, and there's a lot of people who you know, will do like craft nights and stuff. Like, we recently had some people over from our LARP to our place to do a craft night with Olivia, and I'm just like, I am not an artist. I am a patron of the arts. You know, like they're all working on various things. Like, Olivia's like, you know, like doing detail work on these like laser cut leather feathers. One of the guys is like sculpting these like, you know, ears for this rat mask, like out of some sort of like, you know, rubberized whatever. And the other person is like sewing some elaborate thing. And I'm sitting here like, I'm gonna order a burrito.
So y'all hungry? Y'all thirsty?
Right.
Because that's what I can contribute. You know,
Order.
I know where my skills are not, and that's definitely one of those places.
Yeah, for frame of reference, I think that you're talking about a couple of people who, if you saw the shield that Jimmy had at the Game Nights Live, they made that shield, among other things. And of course, Olivia is a spectacular crafter, and so that's good to know that you're bad at something.
Now,
it helps me.
A lot of the discourse these days around Magic, and I think it's just because of sort of what we do professionally, all of us or whatever. But, you know, that there's so many cards. There's so many cards. There's so many versions. There's so many products. And it's funny where Mark Rosewater was talking on his blog where he was like, you know, Richard Garfield originally wanted the experience of where you'd play a game and you'd see a card and you'd have no idea that card even existed. And I think we're honestly getting there, because today somebody posted a Commander 2020 card. I'd never seen that card in my life. Like,
I mean, that definitely happens to me when I play games of Commander. I'm just like, what is that?
Right.
And, you know, and part of that is a matter of like, you know, I haven't been as deeply involved in Magic as, you know, I was years ago. And part of it is just there are so many products, right?
Right.
And I do think that there is some charm to that, to some extent. you know, but at the same time, there's obviously significant deleterious effects of there just being endless spoiler season or, you know, whatever else.
Yeah, now he sort of compared it to a buffet, right? In that you have collectors and you have the for those people and the people who collect things and the people who want to build decks and the competitive players. And so, do you feel that that's sort of what that's a good thing to kind of have that set up and have all these products?
I think I have no problem, and I'm sure people are gonna get angry about this, again with me. I have no problem with stuff like Secret Lairs or even the Magic 30th edition stuff, because those are things that do not impact anyone's play experience, right? Those are things, if those products exist or not, if you are someone who just wants to play with the cards that exist and you don't care about special versions of things or collector's stuff or whatever, it doesn't matter to you. Other than maybe if you're trying to, read a card that is in like Phyrexian or whatever, but that's like already a problem with just other language cards or whatever. Anyway, so it's not really necessarily something that's unique to this, right? I do think that the release of just so many new cards, like new actual playable cards in products, is something that impacts the game as opposed to just, those segments, right? And no matter who you are, if you're involved in Magic, a card which is like legal in gameplay, it matters to you, right? Which is one of the reasons that I really dislike Unfinity. I think Unfinity is like a mess. It being like something that they specifically went out of their way to now make some of the cards legal and some are not, and it's like, okay, well, there's already too many cards, right? There's already too many cards that people who don't want to opt into this experience now also have to know. And it's only some of them though. And it's like, it's just, that I feel is where it bugs me. Or things like Jumpstart, right? Jumpstart can be a cool product. Jumpstart shouldn't be where there's like one of the most exciting new commander cards of the year, right? It's baffling that a card like Preston or whatever is like in some supplemental set that someone who is specifically involved in like, commander would have no reason to buy otherwise. And that's obviously why it is in there. It's because they want people to care about these things and buy them, even if they're not new players who want to have the Jumpstart experience. But you kind of can't have, your cake and eat it too in this sort of situation. It's like you are going to overwhelm people by continuing to do these things. And you're going to have endless spoiler season, like we were saying before, that is going to leave people feeling like burnt out and probably have some people just be like, okay, this is too much for me.
Yeah. I agree on the Infinity. I feel like it being half and half on the fence, and then them just seeing which cards they could get away with making legal in other formats without doing crazy things just to try to sell more product, I do think was a little bit weird and does make it just more complicated for everybody on both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of, we're old men Magic. I believe Mr. Kibler and I are the exact same age. We're 42 at the moment. And so we have lived in a world which has now been surpassed. We lived in a world where there were no planeswalkers. And now the game has been over half of its existence with planeswalkers. And how do you feel having been able to have a really good look at both of those worlds at this point?
I mean, I think, modern Magic with respect to stuff like planeswalkers, it's great. I actually love planeswalkers, both in the sense of what they do for the Magic story of actually having characters that, you can tell the story surrounding that people can have some degree of emotional investment in. And I actually think that the gameplay of planeswalkers is great in the sense that it encourages people to play proactively, because planeswalkers are fundamentally vulnerable to being attacked by creatures. There were too many years in Magic where it's like, oh, you're playing a creature, what an idiot. It was literally like the world of like Rainbow Efreet and a million counterspells, or and Stalking Stones or whatever, right? Like you only played a creature because you had to win somehow, right? Whereas it's like, okay, creatures are actually good. And a big part of why they're good is your opponent can't just play a planeswalker whenever they want and start using it willy-nilly because you can attack it, right? So I think there's a lot of good there. I think it's only in the past handful of years that things have really gotten kind of out of control. I've been pretty vocal on social media about like how much I dislike Modern Horizons specifically, both like as the specifics of some of the cards. I think that Modern Horizons, like Modern is essentially Modern Horizons block constructed in a lot of ways now. Like every deck is like a Ragavan, Fury, Solitude, whatever deck, which I think sucks. Yeah. And I also think that from, like I was saying, with the the proliferation of products, these are actual game pieces that if you want to play the game, you need. So those are the sort of things that in these like limited release, like higher price point type products that, you have like those game pieces that are kind of out of control in terms of what people need to actually acquire them. Not to mention that they completely destroyed any sort of nostalgic landscape of Modern that might have existed when Modern originally was concepted as like, hey, here's a place that you can play your old standard deck once it rotates out. Now, obviously, that wasn't something that was going to be realistic to exist for a long time, but it was absolutely just nuked from orbit by just making these direct Modern sets. Not to mention the fact that it's pretty clear, I think, if you look at like when Modern Horizons released and even the standard sets, that the development resources that Wizards has were not sufficient to support them, because around that same time is when stuff like Eldraine was happening and, and whatnot. And you're just like, oh, look, we have to ban everything because we're trying to make 1 million sets a year that are all, not able to be play tested.
It's the fire philosophy, right?
Well, so that is actually something that I brought up on the pre-show like 2 weeks ago, which is the fact that they're coming out with so many products a problem from a design standpoint? Because they
100%.
don't have, because they don't have time to test everything. They it was the I Love Lucy problem where the conveyor belt is moving too fast and they can't put every chocolate in the box, or a more recent reference that the kids will get. But you understand what I'm saying?
I do. But yeah, I mean, like you look at like Companion, you look at all of Eldraine, you look at like all, a lot of what was in Modern Horizons, Hogak, right? Like, there's just, and obviously I'm not saying that like it is fundamentally terrible if they're having to ban any cards, because it's better that there are exciting cards, than that there's just all these incredibly boring sets that no one's interested in because they play it super safe. But the degree of bans that we have seen, and the fact that they like completely rewrote the Companion mechanic, that one also just like I don't even understand how that was released in that form ever. But
they banned a card in Vintage for the first time in 20 something years.
What a world, right?
It blows my mind that they had to completely rewrite the mechanic and then still had to ban them.
Yes.
Like it was so bad.
And like, what is this the result of, right? Like, is this like, well, there was a directive to really heavily push this particular mechanic somehow? That seems really crazy if that was like, considering the implications of variance reduction the Companion has for the game, the idea that like it is specifically something that you're trying to really, really heavily push is A, probably problematic to begin with, and B, like probably more likely just like, okay, well, this is cool, and we made all these various designs, but we just didn't have nearly enough time to test them because we're just spread way too thin across too many things.
Mm-hmm. So part of what people are curious about for this year is that, and you mentioned, for example, Modern Horizons 2, and going straight to Modern is the Lord of the Rings set. And a lot of people are like, that could just very well be Modern Horizons 3, under a different name or whatever. But I was also really just curious about the Universes Beyond stuff in general and how you feel that's gone. And is there any place you feel like it should be going?
I think they're fine. I'm not, the genie's out of the bottle, right? Like, and it's not going back in, and I feel in particular, like the success, like Warhammer 40K, pre-con decks were a huge success, I have to imagine, for them financially, because I hear people talking about them who barely play Magic, right? Like I have friends who are like, oh my God, there are these Warhammer 40K, Commander decks. I'm going to buy them. I'm going to play Commander. So I think that like from the metrics of like, hey, what are they trying to do with Universes Beyond? They're doing fantastically, at least with that release. I do have more qualms with like a full set, like the Lord of the Rings thing. I think that is, getting into very different territory than like a few pre-cons. And obviously with the D&D stuff, like there's at least like, more clear crossover, I think, because Magic has kind of just always been D&D anyway, in a certain sense. It's like, it came from like the D&D like convention circuit was the whole point of making Magic originally.
Right.
Here's something you play between rounds, while you're waiting for your games to start or whatever. but yeah, like it would be very weird if it's like you're you know, like a pro tour years in the future or whatever, next year or whatever, is like, okay, well, you know, Gandalf controls the #1 deck, and it's like only counter is like, you know,
The
like
One Ring.
Gollum aggro or whatever. It does get a little bit strange, right? But you know, like I said, I feel like the genie's out of the bottle, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I do think it's really weird. So how do you feel about having all of these cross universe? Like, so you said two things that, like, you know, matched, right? So your Gandalf beats your Golem or whatever. But what happens when like your Gandalf has to beat like, you know, Megatron, or it's gonna get super crazy.
Well, that's part of why I feel like the like more limited pre-con stuff that goes to Commander, because that's where people just like they're you know, they're more into the weird stuff, right? Like they're I think that the people in Commander, you know, they're other than the CEDH crowd, are like entirely there to play casually and have fun. And you know, the CEDH crowd, they're still looking to have fun, but they're looking to do it in a different way. But I think that they care less about, like, you know, or at least more receptive to, you know, hey, here's some just zany stuff, right? Here's some like wacky cross things. You know, I know lots of people who like love their, like, you know, Stranger Things Commanders or whatever, you know, and all of that, I think I think it's fine when it's limited like that, right? But that's sort of what I was saying with the combination of, hey, this is being played in competitive events if it's going direct to modern, right? And okay, well, also it's a huge set, like a full size set where you have to fill everything out. You know, I feel like that, again, from the problem of like, hey, you're now having to balance for modern. Hopefully it's not Modern Horizons 3 and they're not like specifically aiming for it to target being competitive in modern, you know.
I mean, they don't want it to suck, right? Like, I mean,
right. It is a weird thing, right? Because if you're saying, hey, this is legal in modern, and it's like, it might as well not be, that's strange, right? But if there's like a card or two that show up, that's very different than Modern Horizons, right?
Right.
Like, it's very different if there's a few cards that might slot into a couple decks versus Modern Horizons, where it's like, that's all anyone plays.
Yeah. The first Modern Horizons was the first set ever that had more than 50% of the cards won a trophy in a modern league.
Wow.
So that was a problem, even though it's called Modern Horizons. But yeah, I mean, it becomes Modern Block Constructed, or Horizons Block Constructed at that point.
I was joking about this on Twitter, that they just need to keep making Modern Horizon sets until there are no cards that weren't printed in a Modern Horizon set that are played in Modern, right? So then you could actually have it be Modern Horizons Block Constructed. The prophecy is fulfilled.
Unbelievable.
The circle
Or
is
just
complete.
go back in time and get rid of them. Don't print them.
Right.
I mean, they're doing that with the March of the Machine set, right? It's basically Avengers Endgame. They even use the same font, so
it's true.
Yeah. Plus whatever the Requiem thing is, I still don't know what that is.
Now we have a lot of fun on our like pre-show and our discussions together, where we can talk about stuff that we don't make content about. Evan famously loves his Counter-Strike.
I love professional Counter-Strike.
You know, I no longer play poker, so I'll talk about poker sometimes, or I'll talk about movies, even though I don't make movies. You know, is there an equivalent of something that perhaps the folks at home don't know that you're a fan of? And I'm trying to phrase this in a way that you don't have to talk about LARP. I was
going to say, like, if we're looking at something that, like, you know, I'm really into that I don't make content, that is my 100% like top hobby these days. That isn't like, you know, something I do for a living.
Fair enough.
And so what do you get out of that? Yeah, I'm curious.
So I actually, fun fact, I actually played my first live action role playing event before I ever played Magic. I was 12 years old. This was 1993. You had to be 13 to play, but it was a week before my 13th birthday, and I just lied to them, and I was a big kid, so they believed me. And I played that LARP for about 10 years, between a couple of different like chapters in both New England and ultimately in Atlanta, and was a non-trivial factor in my decision to go to college in Atlanta. Was, I can keep playing this game. And then I stopped playing after I moved to California until early 2020, where I played one game of this LARP before the pandemic shut everything down. But I love live action role playing. It feeds a lot of various things that I enjoy. It is something that like my like gamer brain can like, look at the rules and figure out how I want to, build a character and like what the best sort of things are for any kind of direction. There's like the performer brain, which is like, hey, I'm playing a character and, I'm in some sort of like interactive, collaborative storytelling thing. And then also kind of the competitive and athletic portion, which is like the actual foam boffer combat. And Ruben can attest, I'm very good at that.
Yeah. Brian's arguably...
So I love it. It's great.
Brian's arguably I would say, he's certainly top 5 in our 400 person LARP.
That's gotta go higher.
He's top 5. He's top 5.
Top 3.
He's top 5 in LARP. He doesn't have great defense.
He's got to say top 5 so that way everybody else who does it can think that they're in it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like that's the way you kind of hedge your bet to make everyone happy.
Give him a little hope. You know what I mean? It's fine.
Again,
I will
when
agree
it comes
with you that I am in the top 5.
What's up?
That I will agree with you that I'm in the top 5.
Perfect.
I will not necessarily agree that I'm
where in the top 5 is debatable. We all argue about where LeBron and MJ stack up. We get it. But yeah, Brian it was very surreal to receive a Facebook message from Brian Kibler, who I didn't really know that well. We just sort of been in the same circles for 15 years, saying, hey, where's your LARP on Facebook one day. That was very surreal.
So it was pretty funny because this was in like December of 2019, and I just moved up to LA. And one of the really funny things about this, before we get to this, is I had done an episode of Rob Dyrdek's Fantasy Factory back in 2011. It was a gaming episode because his company was like licensing the skateboarding card game that my old company, the one that made Ascension and Soulforge, had designed. And he wanted to do a show about gaming that would like integrate it in a way. And then he was like, well, board games don't translate very well to TV. So we want to do a LARP episode. And, they did this like big, like mission with, with also all these people from these various LA LARP communities. And I was like the king at the end who, they got like the prize of the flash drive for completing their mission from. And I met this girl, Cheryl, who was like, oh, you should come up to LA and try this LARP. It's just starting, I think you'd like it. And I was like, oh, it's really far. I live in San Diego. And then like literally 10 years later, I'm playing that LARP. It was Twin Mask. It's the game that I play now.
Have you run into that same person?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
She's one of the staff members who helps run the game. And but yeah, like I had come up to LA. I'd moved up to LA in late 2019. And I messaged Ruben. I was like, hey, like I'm up in LA now. Like I was curious about this LARP that you play. He gives me this big info dump about the game. And I was like, awesome. And he's like, also there are these fighter practices like at this park in North Hollywood. If you want to come by. I was like, oh, when's the next one? He's like, tomorrow. And I'm there. I was just there the next day.
Yeah.
With bells
Did
on.
you
It was also
rummage
really
for foam, or did you come and like ask for foam?
Oh, I came in like borrowed stuff.
Yeah.
Borrowed weapons because they're people who have loaners and everything.
Yeah.
But one of the funny things about that is that I was like asking people, I'm like, oh, where do you get like the best buffer weapons these days? And they're like, oh, it's this website B3. And I go and look at the website and the information, I'm just like, oh, it's like based in like Grafton, Mass. I'm like, I wonder if this is run by, like people I used to LARP with. And like literally the guy who runs the top LARP like weaponry place these days is the guy who used to make my weapons when I played in the 90s. Like literally the first like LARP weapons that I bought and weren't just like, garbage duct tape and foam over PVC or whatever were from this guy. And he's still the best in the business.
So you got the Stan Winston of LARP.
Yeah, I don't know who that is, but sure.
He did a lot of creature work. We'll move here into our fundamental turn, and this is a segment of the show. It's our final segment of the interview show where we have a few fast-paced questions. These are questions designed for you to be like right off the top of your head. Whatever comes to mind, just shout it out and we just move on. All right? So, what is your favorite thing about Magic?
The challenge. It's ever-changing challenge that I can keep with over the years.
Old border or new border?
Old border, except for artifacts, because you can't tell that colored artifacts are colored in old border, or rather they're artifacts.
Favorite set?
Innistrad.
Favorite mechanic?
Kicker, because they're all kicker.
Favorite deck?
Red Zone, the OG.
Card you wish you never got rid of?
Oof, all of them. If I never sold a Magic card, I'd be so rich.
Best advice you repeat?
Best advice you what?
You repeat.
Best advice you repeat? I don't really understand the question.
But, someone asks you something and you give them a piece of advice. What's the most often piece of advice?
Best piece of advice that you'd want to share, sort of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you tell people?
In Magic, I would say the best advice is to only pay attention to what matters. Focus on what actually matters and ignore the rest.
There you go. What do people get wrong about you?
What do people get wrong about me? They don't know who I am when they see old pictures of me and new pictures of me now, because they just seem like a totally different person.
And what do people get right about you?
What do people get right about me? I don't know. I don't know what they think about me. Please like me.
What makes you happy?
What makes me happy? Dogs.
Dogs.
Hey, more dogs.
Failure means what?
Failure means an opportunity to learn.
And success means?
That you're just getting started.
Nice.
I have one thing before we wrap up that I wanted to talk to you about real quick. Now everybody knows you and everybody knows and loves Shiro. Sadly, we lost Shiro this past year. I have Shiro sleeves on my modern deck. That's literally sitting right next to me. I rep the Shiro every single time I play in my trios. But we know recently that you've gotten some new dogs, but some people might not be following you on Twitter. And I thought they might like to know about the new loves in your life. So would you like to tell us a little bit about them? Yeah,
well, this is Oko. He is so named because he's a little himbo who will always lay around and demand pets, his belly in the air. And then Elspeth, or Ellie, is not in the room right now, but she's a little guardian who barks at everything. So she keeps us safe, and I guess he keeps us fed by making food tokens, but mostly they're both just cute.
And you guys adopted both of them?
We did, yeah. They came from a rescue that they were both together. They were a bonded pair. They were with a woman who I guess had started to develop dementia and couldn't take care of them anymore. So we've had them since August, and they're wonderful little pups.
And lastly, do you know how old they are?
They said somewhere between 2 and 4, so we're calling them 3.
Okay. Oh, actually, one more thing. When is the first merch coming out?
When is the first merch coming? We haven't decided anything yet, but I definitely need at least pup emotes. There are the give Oko and Ellie treat rewards on my Twitch channel, but we haven't actually gotten to the point of making them any merch or emotes yet.
Can I recommend a 3 Wolf Moon shirt?
And one of the wolves is Brian. Got it.
Right. Oh, sure.
And the other is the dogs. Well, that said, that ends the fundamental turn and another episode of Magic Mike's +1+1. So finally, Mr. Brian Kibler, where can people find you on the interwebs?
I am BM Kibler everywhere, from Twitter to Twitch to Instagram to TikTok, whatever it is. That's my username. And I do have some cool projects that will be coming out pretty soon. So be sure to keep your eye on those socials for those announcements.
Ooh, very exciting. And we thank our viewers and listeners for joining us here to discuss all things Magic. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. This was fun.
And thank you, Mr. Brian Kibler.
Thank you.
All right, we want here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, Alter Sleeves, my co-host, Nerd Girl, and Ruben Bressler. You got our special guest, Brian Kibler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmikes. Please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online on our Discord, Twitch.tv, at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next time, same place, same time, for another episode of Magic Mike's +1+1. Good night, everybody.